December 15th, 11:42 p.m. You're scrolling through your phone in bed. Outside, the rain has stopped. The Christmas lights still glow over quiet coastal streets in eastern Samar. Then, without warning, the ground beneath you starts to move hard. Not a quick jolt, a long, violent shake that throws you to the floor, shatters windows, and sends your neighbor's motorcycle crashing into the street. 60 seconds later, the shaking stops. You stumble outside. Your phone buzzes with a single, terrifying message. Tsunami warning, eastern coasts. Evacuate immediately. But the sea in front of you still looks calm. Dark, flat, no monster on the horizon. So you hesitate. You wait. You wonder if it's another false alarm. Then you hear it a low roar, like a distant freight train, getting louder. You turn toward the ocean and see the waterline creeping forward. Not a wave, not a splash. Just the entire ocean deciding, all at once, to move inland. By the time you realize what's happening, it's already too late to run. Tonight, we're walking through the nightmare scenarios scientists have warned about for decades. A nighttime megathrust earthquake on the Philippine Trench, followed by a tsunami that slams into unprepared coastal towns in the dark. This didn't happen in December 2025, but everything you're about to hear is based on real science, real faults, and the real history of tsunamis that have already killed thousands of Filipinos. The only question is, when this actually happens, will you be ready or will you be one of the ones who waited? The Philippine Trench is a 1,320-kilometer-long gash in the seafloor, plunging more than 10 kilometers deep along the eastern edge of the archipelago. It marks the boundary where the Philippine Sea Plate dives beneath the Philippine Mobile Belt at a rate of 8 to 10 centimeters per year. For centuries, that movement is smooth and silent. But in some sections, the plates lock together, building strain when the rocks finally break. They don't just shake the ground, they lift the entire seafloor by several meters in less than a minute, displacing billions of tons of water. That displaced water has only one place to go: toward shore. History has already shown what that looks like. On August 17, 1976, a magnitude 8.0 earthquake struck the Moro Gulf along the Cotabato Trench in the middle of the night. Within minutes, a tsunami as high as 9 meters slammed into the coasts of Mindanao, killing over 8,000 people, most of them while they slept. Entire coastal villages were erased. Bodies were found kilometers inland, tangled in trees and debris. The 1976 disaster was not an anomaly. It was a preview. Now, imagine the same scenario, but on the much larger, faster-moving Philippine Trench off eastern Mindanao, eastern Samar, and parts of Luzon. Imagine it happens at night. Imagine it happens in December, when the northeast monsoon is already battering the coasts, when evacuation routes are muddy, when power is spotty, and when millions of Filipinos are focused on Christmas preparations instead of disaster drills. That's the scenario we're walking through tonight. It begins at 11:42 p.m. when a locked section of the Philippine Trench, more than 200 kilometers long, suddenly ruptures in a massive megathrust earthquake. The magnitude is well above 8, possibly approaching 8.5 or higher, making it one of the largest earthquakes in Philippine history. On land, the shaking arrives first. In Davao Oriental, the ground lurches sideways with enough force to knock people out of bed. Concrete posts sway, old houses crack, power lines snap. In Surigao del Norte and eastern Samar, the shaking is intense and lasts for what feels like minutes long, rolling waves that make it impossible to stand. Even in Cebu, northern Mindanao, and parts of the Visayas, the shaking is unmistakable. Long, slow, terrifying. Some people grab their phones and check social media. Others run outside. A few the ones who have been through this before. Remember the simplest, most life-saving rule. If the shaking is very strong or lasts a long time near the coast, do not wait for an official warning. Move to high ground immediately. But most people hesitate. They look at the sea. It still looks calm, dark, flat, no visible monster. They don't realize the monster is already racing toward them at jet plane speeds, unstoppable, and only minutes away. When the seafloor ruptures, it doesn't just shake it, jumps upward by several meters, lifting the ocean surface above it into a broad, low hill of water. In deep water, this tsunami moves at 500 to 800 kilometers per hour, faster than a commercial jet. Ships in the open ocean barely notice, as the water beneath them rises and falls by less than a meter. But as the tsunami approaches the shallow continental shelf near the Philippines, everything changes. The seafloor rises steeply from the deep trench to the coastal shelf. As the tsunami enters shallower water, it slows down, but the energy doesn't disappear. It compresses. The back of the wave catches up with the front, forcing the water to pile higher and higher. What was a barely noticeable bump in the deep ocean becomes a towering wall of water near shore. In some bays, the first sign is not a wave, it's the sea pulling back. About 20 to 30 minutes after the quake, a fisherman in a small barangay in eastern Samar steps outside and sees something impossible. The tide has drained far, far out, exposing coral rocks and the muddy seabed. No one has ever seen bear. Fish flop helplessly in the shallows. Boats tilt on their sides in the mud. Children run toward the exposed seabed, laughing, pointing at the stranded fish. An old woman grabs two kids by the arms and drags them back, screaming a word so many have forgotten. Tsunami. She doesn't wait for sirens. She doesn't wait for a text alert. She runs uphill, pulling the children with her, screaming at neighbors to follow. In Davao Oriental, sirens begin to wave. PHIVOLCS, using data from seismic networks, deep ocean pressure sensors, and coordination with the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center and Japan Meteorological Agency, has confirmed a major trench earthquake and issued tsunami warnings for the eastern coasts of Mindanao, Samar, and parts of eastern Luzon. Radio stations break into programming. Some phones buzz with emergency alerts. Local officials race through streets in trucks with loudspeakers, shouting, "Lumayo sa ban, tsunami warning, evacuate now." Some people listen, many hesitate. The water still looks calm. Stars appear between torn clouds. There is no visible wave on the horizon yet. Then, without warning, the ocean begins to move. In one low-lying barangay, along the Pacific coast of northern Mindanao, a man stands in the street, watching the sea. The waterline seems to creep forward, flooding the sand, then the road, then his feet. He backs away, confused. It doesn't look like a wave, it looks like the entire ocean is simply deciding to move inland. Then it surges, a dark, debris-filled wall of water for 6 meters high. In that area slams into houses built just a few meters above sea level. Wooden walls explode inward. Concrete fences crumble. Cars and fishing boats are lifted, spun, and smashed together like toys. People who waited too long are knocked off their feet and vanish into the churning black water along narrow bays and estuaries. The tsunami behaves even more violently. The shape of the coastline and seafloor combined to amplify the incoming surge. In one narrow bay in eastern Samar, the first wave arrives as a steep front, racing up the channel, its height doubling as it's funneled into a tightening space. Within seconds, it overtops the seawall that protected the town from ordinary storms. Water roars down streets as if a dam has burst, carrying trucks, shards of wood, and fragments of roofs. Streetlights flicker and die. Night becomes a blur of headlights, screams, and the grinding sound of buildings breaking. Even where the tsunami is smaller, its reach is cruel. A wave of only 2 to 3 meters can sweep through ground floors, shatter shop fronts, fill homes with mud and salt water, and trap people on upper stories with no way down. And the first wave is not always the largest. Over the next hour, successive surges arrive. Some are smaller, lulling people into thinking the danger has passed. Then a bigger one slams in, higher up the beach, into areas that thought they were safe. The water moves in and out, dragging debris and people back to sea, then throwing new wreckage inland. Meanwhile, along river mouths, the tsunami surges upstream, reversing the flow. Boats tied in estuaries break loose and crash into bridges. People who thought they were safe because they weren't on the beach watch in disbelief as the river water rises and moves backwards, filled with seawater and debris. By dawn, the outline of the disaster becomes clear. Whole strips of coastline are gunny erased or rearranged. Fishing communities that clung to narrow strips of sand between ocean and road have been shredded. Fields are covered in salt and muck. Boaties lie tangled in nets and trees. The death toll, at first a rumor, becomes a number that keeps climbing. And yet, in other towns, the story is different. In one barangay that had run tsunami drills for years, sirens sounded within minutes of the quake. Residents knew exactly where to go. A school built on high ground, a concrete evacuation center, a ridge behind town. People grabbed go-bags water, flashlights, medication, important papers, and climbed without waiting for official orders. When the first wave slammed into their deserted shoreline, it still destroyed houses. But this time, most of the people were watching from above, terrified, crying, but alive. The difference between the two towns was not luck. It was preparation. This December's tsunami scenario didn't actually happen in 2025, but everything described here is based on real science, real faults, and the real history of tsunamis that have already killed thousands of Filipinos. The Philippine Trench and Manila Trench are both capable of producing magnitude 8+ earthquakes and tsunamis that could reach Philippine coasts in 20 to 40 minutes. The 1976 Moro Gulf tsunami killed over 8,000 people in a single night. It can and will happen again. The only question is, when that night comes, will you be ready? If you live near the coast, the rules are simple. If the shaking is very strong or lasts a long time near the shore, move to high ground immediately. Don't wait for a siren. If you see the sea suddenly drain away or rise strangely fast, run. That is your last warning. Know your evacuation routes and safe zones before an event, not while the water is already rising. Listen to official alerts from PHIVOLCS, NDRRMC, and local disaster offices, not random social media posts. The ocean has no mercy, but it does follow rules. It always warns, in its own brutal language: long shaking, strange tides, sudden retreat. The only question is whether you learn that language in time. Subscribe to BayanTube now and turn on the notification bell. Because when the ground finally shakes and the sea begins to move, you won't get a second chance to be ready. Every video here turns fear into knowledge and knowledge into survival.